The examination is complete, Your Majesty. She cannot bear heirs. Then she has wasted my time. Please, you know me. You know this is wrong. I feel nothing for you, Valentina. Nothing. I, Alpha King Leonidas Wolfstone, reject you. Stonecrest Keep, the great hall, torchlit, enormous, packed wall to wall with wolves who came dressed for a ceremony and stayed for something closer to an execution. The throne at the far end is carved from black ironwood and old bone. It sits elevated above everything else, above the crowd, above the rows of stone pillars, above the flickering orange glow of 100 oil lanterns. On it, the man Valentina Silvercrest had loved for 3 years sits absolutely still, and he will not look at her. She stands alone at the center of the floor, no guard beside her, no hand at her back, just cold stone beneath her feet, and a circle of wolves pressing in on every side without touching her. The way you press around something you have already decided is contaminated. She had done nothing wrong. That was the part that would haunt her longest. Valentina had known something was wrong before the ceremony began. She had felt it in the way Beta Orvan Grimridge would not meet her eyes when he escorted her to the hall, in the way the handmaidens dressed her in silence. No laughter, no small talk, no one reaching over to fix a strand of hair the way they usually did. In the way the hall had gone unnaturally quiet, the moment she stepped through the great doors. She had told herself it was nerves. She had told herself that ceremonies like this always felt heavy. She had told herself that Leonidas, seated on that ironwood throne, cold-faced and distant, was simply performing the gravity that his position required. She had been very good at telling herself things that were not true. The court healer stepped forward first. His name was Velric Coldbrook, a thin man with careful hands and eyes that had seen too much. He had always been kind to her in passing. Now his expression carried something she could not name at first. Then she recognized it: pity. He read from a sealed parchment, his voice steady, his words precise. The examination had been completed. The tests had been run twice over. The results were consistent. The future queen could not carry wolf blood. Her body would not sustain a wolf heir. The bloodline would not take root in her. She was, by every measure the court understood, barren. Gasps moved through the hall like a wave hitting a shore. Whispers ignited. Someone near the back laughed and covered it quickly with a cough. Valentina stood very still. She wanted to speak. She had things to say. She knew her own body. She had never once felt the absence or wrongness that Velric was describing. She had felt the opposite. A quiet aliveness in her chest, steady and deep. Something she had always assumed was simply the bond she shared with her mate. But before she could draw breath to argue, she heard the sound of Leonidas rising from his throne. And the hall went completely silent. He descended the steps slowly. Every step measured, every step deliberate. The kind of walk that reminded every wolf in that room exactly who held the power here. The crowd parted before him without being asked, bodies shifting back like water moving for stone. He crossed the open floor toward her. She watched him come. She searched his face for something, a flicker of apology, a hesitation, some small crack in the stone of his expression that told her this was not what it looked like. She was searching for the man who used to reach for her hand in the middle of crowded rooms without thinking. The man who had pressed his forehead to hers during a rainstorm 2 years ago and told her she was the only steady thing in his world. He stopped close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. He looked at her the way you look at a door you are about to close for the last time. "Leonidas," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady. She would not beg in front of all these people, but she would reach for him one more time. "You know this is wrong. The bond is still there between us. You can feel it." "I feel nothing," he said. The lie was so complete so flat, so entirely without hesitation that it took several seconds for it to land. And when it did not land like words. It landed like a blade. "I, Alpha King Leonidas Wolfstone," he said, his voice filling the hall, "reject you, Valentina Silvercrest, as my mate, my Luna, and my queen. The bond between us is severed. You hold no title in this kingdom. You have no place in this court. You are nothing to this throne." The mate bond broke. If you have never felt a mate bond shatter, there is no comparison that is fair. It is not heartbreak the way humans describe heartbreak. It is not sadness or grief or the dull ache of a door closing. It is something physical, something alive inside your chest, something that had roots and warmth and a pulse all its own, ripped out by force. Not surgically, not gently, ripped. Valentina's knees hit the stone floor before she understood she was falling. She heard the sound of her own breath going ragged. She heard the crowd, all those people who had eaten at the tables she had helped prepare, who had brought her flowers after harvests, who had called her Luna with warmth, and meant it. She heard all of them go quiet. Not one of them moved. She pressed her palms to the cold stone and tried to find something to hold onto. Tried to find the bond in her chest, the way you reach for a lamp in a dark room. There was nothing. Where there had been warmth and presence and the steady knowledge that she was not alone in the world, there was now only a hollow, cold and enormous. Like a room all the furniture had been removed from. It of her. 2 guards seized her arms, not gently. They dragged her across the stone floor, past wolves she knew by name, past faces she had celebrated and mourned beside, past every person in that hall who chose to let it happen. She did not fight them. Not because she had given up, because fighting them in that moment would have given Leonidas exactly the image he wanted. A woman proving she was too wild, too uncontrolled, too unfit to have ever stood beside him. She kept her head up, she kept her eyes open, the great doors swung wide, cold night air hit her face, and she turned her head one last time, just one last time, back toward the throne. Leonidas had already sat back down. He was speaking to someone beside him. His attention had moved on. She had not even cleared the doorway, and he had already moved on. The guards threw her through the doors. The doors closed. She had loved him completely, and he had handed that love back to her like something he had never wanted. The forbidden forest did not feel forbidden. It felt old, aware. Enormous in the way that very ancient things are enormous, not because of their size, but because of the weight they carry. The trees here were massive, their trunks wider than 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder, their bark etched with patterns that shifted at the edge of vision when you stared too long. The air smelled of cold earth and something sweeter beneath it, like rain that had fallen somewhere else and carried its memory here. The guards had dragged her to the tree line and left her there, laughing as they walked back toward the kingdom walls. She had listened to their footsteps fade. She had listened to the forest breathe. Then she had let herself fall. Not metaphorically. Her legs simply gave way, and she sat down in the dirt and the leaves, and she let herself feel all of it. Every piece of what had just happened. The rejection. The hollow in her chest where the bond used to live. The faces of the people who had watched and stayed perfectly still. The look on Leonidas's face, or rather the absence of any look at all, the blankness of a man looking at something he had already decided had no value. She let the grief move through her, all of it. She did not try to stop it or shape it or make it smaller. Out here, there was no one watching her fall apart. Out here, she was allowed. She pressed her hand flat against the forest floor and whispered into the dark, "I am not barren." Her voice was small, broken at the edges, but she said it because she needed to, because if she stopped saying it, if she let the silence take it from her, she might stop being anything at all. The forest shifted. not visibly. But the quality of the silence changed. A moment before it had been empty. Now it was watchful. Something in the arrangement of shadow between the trees had altered. A branch snapped. Too deliberate, too precise, to be anything but chosen. Valentina went still. She had nothing left to lose. That was the only reason she did not run. Then a voice came from the dark between the trees. Low, unhurried, carrying the faintest trace of something that was almost amusement. You smell like a broken bond and a verdict that was wrong. He stepped out of the shadow so smoothly it was as though the dark simply released him. Tall. Silver-haired, the kind of silver that does not come from age, but from something older. He moved the way things move when they have no need to prove anything. No performance, no weight, just presence. His eyes were dark, and in their depths, so far beneath the surface, you had to look carefully, there was a faint luminescence. Like starlight sitting just under still water. He was beautiful the way a blade is beautiful. Designed, precise, not made for comfort. He circled her slowly. She tried to push herself back on her hands, and found that her body had very little left to give. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, and studied her with the focused attention of someone who has found something rare, and is deciding what exactly it means. "You are not barren," he said. Valentina stared at him. The grief in her chest had not moved, but something else had arrived beside it. Something sharp and wary. "You cannot know that. I can feel what sleeps inside you." His voice was quiet, direct, uninterested in performance. "And it has been waiting a very long time." She looked at him. She had no reason to believe him. She had every reason not to trust a creature who materialized out of the forbidden forest, moments after she had been discarded by the only man she had ever trusted. She knew all of this, and still, beneath everything, something in her chest stirred in response to his words. Faint, deep, like a match struck in a very large room. "Your body," he continued, "does not reject life. It rejects wolf bloodline. Because what runs beneath your skin is not entirely wolf. Something older lives there, dormant, unrecognized by healers who only know how to read one kind of blood." Valentina was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved through the trees above them. A single ember-colored leaf drifted down between them and settled on the dirt. "Who are you?" she finally asked. "Zorian," he said. "Not a title, just the name, plain and certain. Why are you here?" "Because I have been watching the Wolflands for someone carrying the signature of dormant Fae blood. And you," his eyes moved over her face with an attention that was not unkind, "were declared worthless by people who did not have the tools to understand what you are." He extended his hand. She looked at it. She looked at him. She thought about Leonidas, already moving on, already speaking to someone else, before she had even cleared the doors. She thought about 3 years of love and trust, and the way she had believed, completely and without question, that she knew the man she had bound herself to. She thought about the hollow in her chest. She thought about the whisper she had pressed into the dark forest floor. "I am not barren." "Come with me," Zorian said. "I am offering you everything they took." She looked at his hand for one more long moment, and she reached out. The bargain sealed the instant their skin met. She felt it like heat moving up her arm, not painful, not violent, but undeniable. A mark bloomed on the back of her hand, dark and intricate, thorns woven through with something that looked like concentrated starlight. She gasped. He watched her. The mark settled and stilled and stayed. She was furious, she was terrified, and beneath both of those things, for the first time since the great doors of Stonecrest Keep had closed behind her, she did not feel empty. The forest folded around them both, and the wolf kingdom disappeared behind her like something she had only dreamed. The world did not so much change as rearrange itself. One breath, the forbidden forest. The next, something the forest had only ever been the border of. The sky above the Embervale court was deep violet, the kind of violet that exists just after sunset, when the last of the light is deciding whether to stay. Threaded through it were currents of living silver, slow and deliberate like breath. The trees were enormous and luminous, their bark pale as bone, their leaves catching the silver light and holding it. At the center of it all, a fortress grown from dark stone and thorned silver, ancient in the way that things are ancient when they were built to last beyond memory. Veins of pale light pulsed through its walls, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. Valentina crossed the threshold of the court on her own 2 feet. She made sure of that. The great hall was lined with fae, dozens of them, every variation of beautiful and unsettling. They turned to look at her the way crowds turn to look at things they were not warned about, with a mixture of assessment and offense. The whispers began before she had taken 3 steps inside. A wolf. He brought a wolf into the court. She wears the bargain mark. What is he doing? Valentina did not flinch. She had just been dragged across cold stone in front of an entire wolf kingdom. A hall full of beautiful, hostile strangers was not going to be the thing that broke her. She stood straight, and she looked back at every face that looked at hers. One voice cut through the rest. You bring a mortal here, cold, precise, carrying the weight of someone who had never once needed to raise her voice to command a room. Into the heart of the court, Lady Lunira Shadowridge stepped forward from the assembled crowd, tall, dark-haired, silver-eyed, and still in the way that stone is still, which is to say, not peaceful, but waiting. She wore authority the way some people wear their own skin, so naturally that you forgot it had ever been put on. Her gaze moved from Zorion to Valentina with the deliberate slowness of an assessment. She is not mortal, Zorion said simply. Lunira's silver eyes sharpened. Something crossed her expression, a flicker of recognition, gone too fast to read, replaced by something harder and colder beneath it. Valentina met her stare and held it. She is my chosen, Zorion said. Silence detonated across the hall. Then every voice in the room seemed to speak at once, a wave of sound crashing over itself, disbelief and outrage, and something that sounded almost like fear threaded through it all. Into this storm appeared a figure at Valentina's elbow, lean, easy-moving, carrying himself the way someone carries themselves when they have decided that the best response to nearly everything is polite amusement. He materialized beside her as if he had always been there, and she had simply failed to notice. Well, he said, in a voice pitched low enough that only she could hear it. You have made quite an impression. She glanced sideways at him. His eyes were golden, bright and sharp, the eyes of someone who missed nothing, but pretended to be too relaxed to bother. He wore a small private smile. Is that good? She asked. He considered this with theatrical gravity. Absolutely not, he said. Welcome to the Embervale court. She almost laughed. She was not sure she remembered how. But something close to it moved through her chest. His name, she would learn, was Calix Veilheart. He was Zorion's observer, the closest word any wolf language had for a role that encompassed advisor, chronicler, and the only person in the court who could say the truth out loud and survive it. He had decided, apparently in the first 30 seconds of knowing her, that she was interesting. She would later understand what a gift that was. Then the pain hit, sudden, focused, deep in her abdomen, not illness, not injury, but a pulse, faint and real and startlingly alive, answering something in the air around her, the way a string answers a note played on the same pitch, somewhere across a room. She pressed her hand to her side and caught her breath. Zorion was beside her before she had processed that she needed steadying. He did not touch her. His hand hovered just at her side, close enough to catch her if she fell, far enough to leave the choice to her. What do you feel? He asked. His voice had dropped, no longer the formal Fae Prince addressing his court, but something quieter and more direct. She searched for the word. "Alive," she said. "I feel alive." Something shifted in his expression. Something brief and unguarded, there and gone in half a second, as if a door had opened and closed before she could see what was on the other side. "Yes," he said, "that is exactly what it is." She looked at him then, truly looked at him, not the way you look at something dangerous, but the way you look at something that has surprised you. He looked back, and in the cool, composed stillness of his face, there was something she had not expected to find. Something careful. Something that was almost gentle. She filed it away and said nothing. The hall was still in an uproar around them. Lunira's gaze had not moved from her face, but for that one moment, with the pulse alive in her chest and Zorion's voice still low and steady beside her, Valentina Silvercrest felt the unmistakable sensation of being, for the first time in a very long while, exactly where she was meant to be. The private garden was deep inside the palace, through 3 corridors, and down a passage that most residents of the court seemed to avoid without being able to say why. Valentina found it by instinct, drawn by something she had no name for. Yet, a pull in her chest, gentle and persistent, like someone quietly calling her name from a distance. The garden was small and very still. A pool of dark water sat at its center, its face perfectly calm, barely reflecting the silver light that filtered down through the trees overhead. The trees here had pale bark and no leaves, just dark branches that reached upward in patterns that looked deliberate, like writing she could almost read. The whole space breathed with a quiet luminescence that did not come from any single source. She knelt beside the water. Her reflection looked back at her. Same face, same hands, but her eyes were different. There was something in them she had not seen before. A faint brightness, like a lamp turned low but not extinguished. She looked like herself, but more present, more certain. Like something that had always been in her had finally been given room to take up the space it was owed. She reached out and touched the surface of the pool. The water lit up, not in a dramatic way, not in a rushing, overwhelming way, but from somewhere far below the surface, silver light bloomed, slow and steady, moving upward like something waking from a long sleep. It reached the surface and spread outward from her fingertips in rings of pale light. She lifted her hand. The light faded slowly, reluctantly, as if it wanted to stay. She sat with that for a moment. It responds to you. She did not startle. She had heard his footsteps long before he spoke. Zorion stepped into the garden from the far passage and stopped a few feet from the pool's edge, watching the last of the light fade from the water. "It always has," she replied. She did not know how she knew that. She simply did. He moved to stand near her, not close, but closer than the formal distance he maintained in the hall. He looked at the water for a moment, then at her. "You are angry," he said, "about the bargain. You sealed it before I understood what I was agreeing to." "Yes." She waited for the justification, the Fae explanation for why that was acceptable. It did not come. He said the word, "yes," and left it standing there without support, accepting it as simply true. That disarmed her slightly. She had been ready for argument. "Why?" she asked. "Because if I had explained it fully first," he said, "you would have spent the time I needed to help you debating whether you trusted me. And you did not have the time, you were dying." She looked at him. "You could have let me make that choice." "I could have," he agreed. "I did not. I was wrong." A pause. "Ask me anything now. I will tell you everything." She turned back to the water. She thought about the pulse in her chest, the twin rhythms she had been trying to understand since she arrived. She thought about what it meant to carry something that her entire life, her entire history, her entire kingdom had failed to recognize or understand. "What am I carrying?" she asked. "Life," he said simply. 2 lives, each one carrying both bloodlines, wolf instinct and Fae magic. They are not in conflict. They are simply trying to understand how to exist together. She was quiet with that, and the court thinks they are dangerous. The court fears what it does not understand. That is not the same as something being dangerous. She reached toward the water again. This time the light came faster, brighter, like it remembered her. And Lunira? Zorion was quiet for a moment. Lunira fears losing what she has spent her life protecting. I understand that. It does not make her right. Before either of them could continue, there was a sound at the garden's edge. Both of them went still. Lunira stepped in from the far passage, and this time she wore no diplomatic mask. Her silver eyes moved between them, with an expression that had moved past contempt into something more deliberate, more targeted. "This power you are learning to touch," she said, addressing Valentina directly, "as if Zorion were not in the room at all, will destroy you before you learn to hold it. You are a wolf. This court is not built for wolves. The Fae Prince's protection is not permanent, and when it ends, you will have no one." Valentina stood. Her voice came out level. "You say that like I came from somewhere safe." A pause. "I didn't, so your warning isn't as frightening as you think it is." Something moved behind Lunira's eyes. She stepped forward, and magic gathered at her fingertips, cool and silver blue, coiling like smoke. And then Zorion was simply there, standing between them. He had not rushed. He had not raised his voice. He was simply present, and the whole garden responded to it. The trees stilling, the water settling, the shadows deepening around the edges, as if the garden itself had chosen a side. "You have forgotten," he said to Lunira, his voice perfectly quiet, "that she is not standing alone." Lunira looked at him for a long moment. Then she let the magic dissipate. She turned without another word and walked out of the garden. But the look she gave Valentina in that last second before she disappeared was not retreat. It was postponement. Valentina let out a slow breath. She did not realize she had been holding it. Zorion turned back to her, and the formal distance was gone. He was simply standing close, looking at her with the same focused attention he had given her in the forest. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him. The words were simple, practical. There was no performance in them, no audience he was playing to. Just the direct, quiet question of someone who wanted a real answer. "Yes," she said, and she noticed, somewhere in the vicinity of her chest, that she meant it. The Emberville sky did not truly darken. It simply deepened, the violet going richer, the silver currents of light moving slower, more dreamlike, as the hours passed. Valentina had learned to measure time by the rhythm of those currents rather than by any clock or sun. She could not sleep. The pulse inside her had grown clearer over the past several days. The 2 rhythms she carried beginning to separate into something she could hold in her attention individually. One was warm, golden at its edges, sitting just below her ribs. The other was cooler, silver bright, higher up and to the left. She lay in the dark for an hour trying to find a comfortable position between them, and eventually gave up and went to the balcony. The view from her room looked out over the heart of the court, the great courtyard with its luminous trees, the paths that wound between them, the silver-threaded sky above. Quiet now, the court at rest. She had been standing there perhaps 20 minutes when she heard footsteps she had come to recognize. Zorion stepped onto the adjoining section of the balcony, separated from hers by a low stone partition. He looked out at the courtyard the way she did, not performing rest, not pretending to be somewhere else, just looking at his own world quietly. After a moment, she said, "Tell me your name." He glanced at her. "You know my name." "I know your title," she said. "I know what the court calls you and what the histories record. I mean your name. The one that belongs to you." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she almost let it go. Names carry power here, he said. To give someone your name is to give them something real. I know, she said. I'm still asking. The silence stretched between them. The silver currents above drifted. A single pale moth, enormous and silent, crossed the space between them and vanished into the dark. Zorion, he said. Not the Fae Prince. Not the title, just the man. The word sounded different when he said it this way, quieter, unarmored. Zorion, she repeated back, and something in his expression shifted, very slightly, in a way she was beginning to learn to read. Not the composed stillness of the Fae court. Something underneath it. Something that was deciding whether to come closer or step back. Tell me about Leonidas, she said. He stilled. Not about what he is to me, she clarified. About what he is to you, because there is something between you that is not just politics or territory, and I keep feeling the weight of it without understanding where it comes from. Zorion turned away from the courtyard. He leaned against the balcony railing and looked down at his own hands for a moment. We grew up together, he said, in the years when the Wolf Kingdom and the Fae Court still spoke to each other. Before the silence, he was not a king yet. I was not ruling anything. We were just young and stubborn and certain we understood the world. A pause. He was the closest thing to a brother I have ever known. She listened. Then there was Nirel. His voice changed, not dramatically, but the cadence shifted, like a path that had been smooth suddenly running over broken stone. She was my mate, the truest bond I have ever felt. I believed nothing could touch it. What happened to her? She went to Leonidas. His jaw tightened. I believed for years that he manipulated her, that he used the power of the Wolf Kingdom to take what belonged to someone else. I built everything on that belief, my grief, my rage. The silence between the realms, he paused. I ruled from that wound for a very long time. Valentina was still. She felt something happening inside her, not her own memory, not anything she had lived, but something older, something moving through the Fae bloodline she carried like a message written in a language she was only just learning to read. A flash. A woman. Dark-haired, beautiful, frightened, pressing her hands flat against a stone wall and whispering to herself in the dark. The bond is breaking me from the inside. I cannot survive this. I am so sorry. I am so sorry, Valentina inhaled sharply. Zorion looked at her. What is it? She pressed her hand to her sternum. The image was already fading, but the weight of it remained. I saw something, she said carefully. Not a memory of mine, older than that. What did you see? She took a breath. She chose to go to him, not because she wanted him, not because Leonidas persuaded her or took anything from her. She kept her voice steady, because the truth she was about to speak needed to be carried clearly. The bond between the two of you was fracturing. It had been fracturing for a long time, and it was ending her life. She was dying, Zorion. Slowly, from the inside. She was desperate, and she was trying to survive. And she walked toward the only person she thought could hold the fracture closed long enough for her to breathe. He had gone completely still. She did not stop loving you, Valentina continued. The vision carried that too. She walked away from you, and she still loved you. She just chose survival over dying beside something that was already breaking. The silence that followed was not angry. It was the particular silence of a truth that has just removed the foundation stone of something a person has been standing on for a very long time. She died anyway, he said. His voice was barely sound. Yes, Valentina said, I know, so Leonidas did not. He was not innocent, she said. He loved her in ways that consumed her, but he did not steal her. No one stole her. She was a woman who made an impossible choice while she was trying to survive. And she did not survive anyway. And you have been hating your brother for something that was already broken, long before he ever touched it. She watched the words reach him. She watched the grief he had shaped into armor find the crack she had just made in it and begin to move through it. It was not comfortable to watch. It was not meant to be. She reached out and rested her hand on his forearm. Just that. No words added to it, just the weight of her hand and the warmth of it against the cool precision of his wrist. He looked down at her hand, then up at her face. The distance between them had been narrowing since the night in the garden. Here, in the quiet of two people in the dark, saying true things to each other, it nearly closed. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because Nirel deserved to be grieved," Valentina said, "not weaponized. And because you deserve to put that weight down." He did not respond immediately. But he did not move away from her hand either. And when he finally looked at her, fully, without the distance of title or court, or the armor of an old wound, she saw in his eyes something she had not expected. The beginning of something that had not been there before. The court felt it before the doors opened. It moved through the hall like a change in pressure, like the feeling before a storm, when the air goes very quiet and the birds stop. Valentina felt it in her own chest, familiar and strange at once, a pull she recognized from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Zorion's expression sharpened. His eyes moved to the great doors. "He is here," Valentina said. The great doors of the Embervale court exploded inward. Leonidas Wolfstone crossed the threshold, the way men cross thresholds when they have done something difficult to get there and are not interested in letting anyone see how difficult it was. He was battered. The crossing through the forbidden forest had left its marks on him, cuts along his jaw, a tear in his armor at the shoulder, dirt on his boots that told the story of days of hard travel. He had brought warriors behind him, a dozen of them, equally worn and equally unbowed. He did not look at the warriors assembled on the Fae side. He did not look at the shadows that deepened along the walls in response to his presence. He scanned the hall with the focused, relentless attention of someone looking for one specific thing. And he found Valentina immediately. Something crossed his face. Not triumph. Not the cold certainty he had worn in the great hall of Stonecrest Keep when he had rejected her. This was more complicated, more tangled. The face of a man looking at something he thought he had finished with, and discovering only now, at the worst possible moment, that he had not. The Fae court rose to meet the intruders, shadows sharpened into edges. Magic coiled in the air, visible, hot, ready. Zorion's court warriors stepped forward. Leonidas's wolves braced. War assembled itself in the space of a single breath. Valentina moved first. She did not think about it. She stepped into the center of the hall, into the open space between both armies, and she said one word: stop. Her voice carried something that did not belong to her alone, something ancient in it, something that lived in the Fae blood she was still learning to fully claim, something that resonated in the very stone of the court's walls. The twin pulses in her chest surged outward, and for the first time since she had arrived in the Embervale court, they moved together. Not two separate things, but one complete thing, light and shadow aligned. The hall obeyed, not because she demanded it, because something in the sound she made was so undeniably real, so entirely without pretense, that every person in that room went still long enough to listen. She turned to face Leonidas, and she looked at him the way she had promised herself she would if she ever saw him again, with open eyes and a steady voice, and absolutely no apology. "You came here," she said. "Why?" He said her name, just that, Valentina. The way someone says the name of something they had convinced themselves they could live without and have just discovered, in a cold hall in a foreign realm, that they were wrong. "You don't get to say my name like that," she said. "Not here, not after what you did in that hall." She stepped forward, and he did not step back. "You called me barren. You read a verdict someone else handed you, and you decided it was true without asking me a single question. You let your mother's satisfaction become your certainty, and you built a verdict on it. And you dragged me across cold stone in front of everyone I knew. The hall was absolutely silent. I am not barren, she said. I never was. My body cannot carry wolf blood. It carries something older. Something every healer in your kingdom missed, because they only know how to read one kind of blood. And the life I carry now, the two lives I carry, they exist because someone in this world understood what I was before you decided what I wasn't. She turned then to both of them, Zorion still at the far end of the hall, watching her with an expression she had never quite seen on him before. Leonidas, standing in the doorway he had broken open, his warriors behind him, all of them still. And the two of you, she said, have been circling a wound that has nothing to do with territory or kingdoms. It has to do with a woman named Nirel, who deserved better from both of you and didn't get it. Leonidas went very still. You loved her, Valentina said to him. I know that, and the way you loved her, completely, without room for her to breathe, holding her so tightly she couldn't tell you what was wrong, that consumed her. You did not steal her, but you did not save her either, and you have carried the guilt of that by pointing it outward, finding enemies to aim it at, building a wall around your own heart, so nothing else could get close enough to break it. She looked at Zorion, and you built a war on a lie you told yourself because the truth was unbearable. The truth that Nirel was already dying, that the bond between you had begun to fracture, and it was ending her life, and she made the only choice she could see, and it still wasn't enough. A breath. She was not stolen from you. She was lost. And grief and blame are not the same thing, even when they feel identical. The power inside her had been building quietly through every word. The twin pulses moving together with an alignment she had not felt before. Like two rivers, finding the same course and running together with doubled strength. It moved outward from her now, filling the hall, pressing against every wall, touching every shadow, reaching the assembled warriors on both sides, and pressing gently but unmistakably against their readiness to fight, not command. Something closer to clarity. One by one, the warriors lowered their weapons. Leonidas dropped to one knee, not to Zorion, not in surrender, in acknowledgement of what he had just seen, of what she had just done, of the woman standing in the center of two armies, neither army's possession, both realms alive in her chest. Zorion did not kneel, but something in him, that long-held architecture of weaponized grief, shifted. Just enough to let the air in. The hall held its breath. Valentina stood in the center of all of it and felt, for the very first time in her life, like she was standing exactly in the shape she was always meant to fill. She had not come here to win. She had come here to tell the truth. But standing in that hall, with both kings finally still, and the magic of two realms answering her voice, she understood that sometimes truth is the most powerful thing in any world. The silence lasted a long time. No one was in a hurry to break it. The war did not end in a treaty. It ended in silence. The kind of silence that settles after two people have finally stopped lying to themselves and are simply sitting with what remains. Leonidas stayed in the Emberville court for 3 days. He did not ask Valentina for forgiveness. She did not offer it. What passed between them in those 3 days was something smaller and more honest than either of those things. The simple acknowledgement from both of them that they had each been shaped by the stories they told about themselves, and some of those stories had needed breaking. He left on the 3rd morning. He paused at the great doors, already repaired from his entrance, and turned back one last time. Valentina stood at the far end of the hall. The light of the Emberville court gathered around her differently than it had when she arrived. Less like light landing on a stranger. more like light returning to its source. "I was wrong," Leonidas said, not loud, just clear, about all of it. "I know," she said. He nodded once, and he walked out. She stood with that for a moment. Then she turned and went back into the life she was building. The Embervale court did not transform overnight. Change in an old place is slow, like water finding its way through stone. Not dramatic, not sudden, but unstoppable. Lunira did not soften, but she stepped back from outright opposition. Something in the confrontation with Leonidas had shifted her relationship to Valentina in a way that neither of them discussed directly, but both of them understood. Valentina had stood in the center of the court's most dangerous moment and held it together without magic she had been trained in, without titles or armies or the authority of bloodline. She had held it together with truth. Lunira respected that even if she did not love it. Calix Veilheart remained a constant, appearing at Valentina's elbow during court sessions with perfectly timed observations that somehow diffused tensions before they could build. He had an instinct for the moment before things went wrong, and an apparently inexhaustible supply of exactly the right comment to turn the atmosphere around. Valentina had decided he was the most useful person in the court. A conclusion she was careful not to share openly because it would have delighted him. "You know," he said one afternoon, falling into step beside her in the eastern corridor, "you are the only person who has ever come into this court and made it quieter." She glanced at him. "That's not a compliment." "In this court," he said pleasantly, "it absolutely is." She shook her head, but she was smiling. Zorion did not rush. She came to understand this about him, the way you understand deep things. Not all at once, but in accumulation. He was not a man who moved quickly toward anything, not because he was afraid, but because the things he decided to move toward, he intended to reach. And he was careful about what those things were. He began finding her in the evenings. Not formally, not announced. He would simply arrive where she was. The garden, the balcony, the Eastern Library with its shelves of bark-bound volumes, and sit near her, or stand near her, and talk or not talk, depending on what the evening needed. They ate meals together sometimes, the two of them and Calix, and the conversations ranged from the nature of Fae magic to the political history of the Wolf Kingdom, to small absurdities that Calix manufactured for entertainment purposes, and that neither Valentina nor Zorion could entirely resist. One night in the library, Zorion told her about the early years of the Embervale court. Not the history that was recorded, the history that was lived. The winters when the silver light went dim for weeks, and the whole court held its breath. The spring that the great eastern tree bloomed for the first time in 200 years, and every Fae in the realm felt it in their chest at once, like a joy they hadn't been waiting for and couldn't explain. He told her about Nirel, not the wound of her, not the grief. The real her laugh, the way she used to argue about everything, and be right about half of it, the way she understood the Embervale realm at depth most Fae never reached, even after centuries. Valentina listened to all of it, and she understood, listening, that this was what trust looked like when it was being slowly and deliberately rebuilt. Not performed, not rushed, just real, piece by piece, offered and received. The evening came when he found her on the balcony, standing in the cool dark, watching the silver currents move above the courtyard. She felt him arrive before she heard him. She was getting better at that. He stood beside her for a while. They watched the light move. Then he said, "I was wrong about what I thought you were when I found you in the forest." She looked at him. "What did you think I was?" "Useful," he said. "I thought you were useful. Someone carrying the Fae bloodline signature I had been searching for. Someone whose biology could do what needed to be done." A pause. "I did not think about who you were beyond that, and I should have." She was quiet for a moment, You gave me a bargain before I understood what I was agreeing to. Yes, and you brought me into a court that was hostile to me. Yes, and you did not ask me what I wanted. No. He turned to face her. His eyes, in the dark of the balcony, carried that deep-water luminescence she had come to know. I am telling you now that I was wrong, and I am asking you now, with full understanding of everything I am saying, if you will let me try to be right. She looked at him for a long moment. The hollow in her chest, the one Leonidas had left, had not filled back up. But it had transformed into something else. Not an absence, more like cleared ground. Space where something new could be built if the right things were planted. You are strange, she said, for someone who is trying to apologize. The faintest curve of his lips. I have been told. I don't want to be useful to you, she said. I don't want to be the woman who carries the right bloodline and says the right things and holds the right realms together. I want to be chosen, as I am, not as what I produce. You are chosen, he said. Not the bargain, not the heirs, you. The woman who reached her hand into the dark in the middle of the worst night of her life and decided to keep going. The woman who walked into a court that hated her and made it pay attention. The woman who told me the truth about Nirel when she could have kept it to herself and let me stay comfortable in my anger. A breath. I choose you. Every piece of it. She held that. She held it carefully. The way you hold things that have been offered honestly and need to be received the same way. I choose you too, she said, not because you gave me power or a place or a name for what I am, because when I had nothing, you saw me, not my usefulness, not my bloodline, me. The Embervale sky moved above them. The silver currents drifted. Somewhere in the courtyard below, the great luminous trees breathed in unison. He raised his hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was careful, precise. The same attention he gave everything, but warmer now, no longer the assessment of a man deciding what something meant, but the touch of someone who had already decided and was simply, quietly, acting on it. She let herself lean into it. And for the first time since Stonecrest Keep, the night felt entirely safe. The twins came into the world on a night when the silver currents above the Embervale court ran faster than usual, bright and urgent, as if the sky itself had been informed of what was happening and found it worth marking. Zorion did not leave her side through any of it. He had not made this announcement. He had not explained his presence to the court officials who manage these things with traditional Fae protocol. He had simply been there when she needed him, and stayed there when she did not ask him to leave. Calix waited outside, with an expression he was working very hard to keep composed, and not entirely succeeding. The first cry echoed off the ancient stone walls of the Embervale court, and something in the air changed. The assembled Fae who had gathered in the outer hall felt it simultaneously, a resonance, as if both realms had spoken at once in a single note that held without breaking. Two children. The first had Zorion's silver hair and her dark eyes, and she arrived in the world at full volume, making her opinion of the transition immediately clear to everyone within hearing distance. The second arrived quieter, looking around at everything with the calm curiosity of someone taking inventory. His eyes already that deep-water luminescence of his father's, his hands small and certain. She held them both and felt the twin pulses in her chest, the ones she had been learning to hold since the night Zorion had told her what they were, settle into something entirely new. Not two competing rhythms. One. They are balance, Zorion said. He was looking at the children the way he looked at very few things, without calculation, without reserve, just completely. They are both, Valentina said. Everything this court feared and everything it needed. Yes, he said. That tends to be true of things worth having. 3 weeks later, a messenger arrived from the Wolf Kingdom with a single package. No letter, No formal diplomatic correspondence. Just a clean cloth wrapped around a single silver branch, cut from the ironwood tree at the center of Stonecrest Keep's courtyard. Valentina held it for a while. She knew what it meant. There were some things that did not require words. She carried the branch to the garden with the dark pool and laid it at the base of the pale tree that grew at the water's edge. She stood there for a moment in the quiet. "Nirel," she said softly, "to the water, to the light, to whatever in this old place might be listening. You are grieved, not weaponized. Grieved." The water rippled once, gently, without a cause. She walked back inside. Years passed the way they do in the Embervale court. Not marked by seasons exactly, but by the turning of the silver light. The way the trees grew, the slow accumulation of days that become the shape of a life. The twins were 6 years old and entirely themselves. The girl, Zorine, named for her father in a way that made him look away for a moment when Valentina suggested it, was loud and certain and brimming with a magic she had absolutely no patience for learning to contain. She had already discovered that the dark pool responded to her laughter and was conducting experiments on this fact at every opportunity. The boy, Arlen, a name Valentina had simply known when she looked at him, was quieter and deeply observant. He had his father's stillness but used it differently. To watch, to understand, to wait for the moment when saying one thing would accomplish what 100 other things would not. Calix had already declared him his favorite person in the court, and was shamelessly influencing his aesthetic sensibilities. Valentina stood on the balcony of her rooms now, fully chosen rooms in a chosen home, and watched her children run patterns through the courtyard below, trailing magic behind them like light through moving water. Zorene's laughter floated up. Arlen said something quiet to the tree beside him, and the tree responded by flowering out of season, blooming pale and silver, and entirely unbothered by the fact that this was not how trees were supposed to work. She felt Zorian arrive behind her, the warmth of him, his arms moving around her from behind, unhurried, certain, the embrace of someone who has no performance left to give and does not need one. She covered his hands with hers. "Are you happy?" he asked. His chin rested lightly at the top of her head. His voice was quiet, not testing, genuinely asking the way he asked everything, directly, and expecting a real answer. She looked at her children. She thought about the woman who had stood on a cold stone floor in front of a hall full of wolves and felt the world end. She thought about the woman who had pressed her hands into the dirt of the forbidden forest and whispered, "I am not barren," into the dark, not because she believed it yet, but because she could not afford to stop saying it. She thought about everything those two women had carried to get to this balcony, to this life, to this moment. She was grateful to them. She would not be here without them. "Yes," she said. He pressed his lips gently to the side of her head. "Good," he said. Simple, final, enough. Below them, Zorine finally managed to make the pool light up on purpose and let out a shriek of triumph that probably startled the wolves in the next realm. Arlen looked at his sister with quiet pride and then looked up at the balcony, finding his parents without searching, and raised his hand in a small, certain wave. Valentina waved back. She had been discarded as worthless. She had been thrown into the dark. She had been told, by the person she trusted most in the world, that she was nothing, and she had walked out of that dark, not because someone saved her, but because she had refused, even at her lowest, even with her hands pressed into the cold dirt of a forbidden forest, to stop believing that she deserved to. The silver light moved above the Embervale court. The trees breathed. Her children ran in the courtyard below, two small people, carrying both realms in their blood, proof that something entirely new and entirely possible had entered the world. And Queen Valentina Silvercrest of the Emble Court stood in the warmth of a love she had chosen freely, in a life she had built from nothing, and she held it all. She had earned every single piece of it. That's the end of this story. If you stayed until now, you already know why she won. Not because she was given power, not because she was rescued, because she refused to let them define the end of her story. If this moved you, drop a comment below. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. More worlds, more queens who rise. I'll see you in the next one.